Hey everyone, ever had someone block your driveway and then try to play the victim when you ask them to move? Well, buckle up because today's story involves a drunk guy, a business card thrown in anger, and the most creative revenge that'll have you questioning whether our narrator is a genius or went too far. This Reddit tale has twists, police involvement, and a revenge plot so petty it's practically an art form. So let's dive into this wild ride. The evening air in downtown Vancouver carried the familiar hum of city life. Distant traffic, muffled conversations from sidewalk cafes, the occasional honk of an impatient driver. We navigated through the maze of narrow streets, my fiancée beside me and her mother in the back seat, when I felt my shoulders finally beginning to relax. After a long day of showing my future mother-in-law around the city, all I wanted was to pull into our garage and call it a night. But as we turned into the alley behind our building, my heart sank at the sight that greeted us. A silver sedan sat squarely in front of our garage door, its owner nowhere to be seen. The metallic paint gleamed under the harsh alley lighting, looking almost smug in its defiance. This wasn't unusual. Living next to a liquor store meant dealing with inconsiderate parkers was practically a weekly occurrence. But tonight, with my fiancé's mother visiting from across the country, I really didn't want any drama. We waited in our car, engine idling with that particular rumble our old Honda made when it needed a tune-up. The minutes ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. My future mother-in-law shifted uncomfortably in the back seat, the leather creaking under her weight, probably wondering why we were just sitting there in a dimly lit alley. Finally, the liquor store door chimed with that sharp electronic note, and out walked a man in his 30s, brown paper bag crinkled in his grip. He noticed us immediately, three people sitting in a car, clearly waiting for something. Instead of the apologetic wave I was hoping for, he paused, looked directly at us, and made some comment I couldn't quite hear through our closed windows. His smirk was unmistakable, though, the kind of expression that makes your jaw clench involuntarily. I watched as he climbed into his car, certain he would drive away and end this minor inconvenience. Instead, he did something that made my blood pressure spike. The distinctive crack of a beer can opening echoed off the alley walls, followed by the sight of him taking a long, deliberate swig. He turned to face us with a satisfied grin, foam still clinging to his upper lip. The message was clear. He wasn't going anywhere. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I'd been in too many shouting matches over parking spaces in this neighborhood, and frankly, I was tired of it. More importantly, I didn't want my first impression on my future mother-in-law to involve me screaming at strangers in an alley. Taking a deep breath that tasted of exhaust fumes and autumn air, I turned off the engine. "I'll be right back," I said as calmly as I could manage, stepping out into the cool evening air that immediately raised goosebumps on my arms. I approached his car with my hands visible, using the most diplomatic tone I could muster. "Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry to bother you, but you're parked in front of our garage. Would you mind moving up just a bit so we can get home?" The man, I'd later learn his name was Christopher, barely glanced at me before responding in a voice thick with alcohol and contempt. "Why don't you go find somewhere else to park, buddy?" The casual cruelty in his tone caught me off guard, like a slap I hadn't seen coming. I tried again, explaining our situation more clearly. "Look, I understand you're just trying to enjoy your drink, but this is our garage. We live here. Could you please just move your car a few feet so we can park?" That's when everything changed. Christopher's door swung open with enough force to make the metal groan, and suddenly he was standing inches from my face. His breath hit me like a wave, stale beer mixed with something sharper, more unpleasant. Every instinct told me to match his aggression, to show him I wasn't someone to mess with. I could feel my fists wanting to clench. But I could feel my fiancée and her mother watching from the car, and I forced myself to stay calm. "Just get back in your car and leave," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline making my hands shake slightly. "There's no reason for this to escalate." But Christopher had already decided how this encounter would go. He shoved me hard enough to make me stumble backward, my shoes scraping against the rough asphalt. Then he did it again, his palms hitting my chest with deliberate force, clearly trying to provoke a fight. That's when I pulled out my phone, the screen's blue glow illuminating both our faces in the dim alley. "I need police assistance," I said into the phone, never taking my eyes off Christopher. "There's a man blocking my garage and he's become physically aggressive." Hearing me on the phone seemed to embolden Christopher rather than deter him. He pressed closer, his face so close to mine I could see the red veins threading through his eyes. When I instinctively stepped back and raised my arm to create some distance, he walked directly into it, a move that seemed almost choreographed, like he'd done this before. "He's assaulting me!" Christopher suddenly screamed, his voice cracking with false panic that echoed off the brick walls. "I need help! This man is attacking me!" The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a man who had just finished pushing me around, now claiming to be the victim because he'd walked into my outstretched arm. But I stayed on the line with the emergency operator, documenting everything in real time, my voice growing steadier as I focused on the facts. Within minutes, the benefits of living downtown, two police officers appeared at the mouth of the alley, their footsteps creating sharp echoes. Christopher's transformation was immediate and dramatic. Gone was the belligerent drunk who'd been shoving me around. In his place stood a seemingly reasonable man with a trembling voice and shoulders hunched in a victim's posture. "Officers, thank God you're here," he began in a tone completely different from the sneering voice he'd used with me, launching into an elaborate story about how I'd approached his car and threatened him. According to Christopher's version, he was just an innocent man trying to enjoy a drink when I'd become aggressive and violent. Fortunately, my fiancée and her mother had witnessed the entire encounter from our car. Their account corroborated mine perfectly, and the officers quickly noted that Christopher's car was illegally parked in front of a private garage. The situation seemed resolved until one of the officers spotted the open beer can in Christopher's console, its aluminum surface gleaming under his flashlight beam. "Sir, have you been drinking and driving tonight?" the officer asked, his tone shifting to professional concern. Christopher's response was as creative as it was unbelievable. He claimed he'd found the empty can on the street and was planning to return it for the 5-cent deposit, a good Samaritan simply doing his civic duty. His voice took on an almost wounded quality, as if he couldn't believe anyone would question his noble intentions. When the breathalyzer test came back just under the legal limit, the officers had no choice but to let him go. As Christopher climbed back into his car, I thought the ordeal was finally over. But he had one last surprise for me. Rolling down his window, he threw something at my feet, a business card that fluttered to the ground like a fallen leaf, landing face up on the cracked asphalt. "You don't even know who you're messing with," he called out as he drove away, his voice carrying that same sneering quality from earlier, leaving me standing in the alley holding his card. I picked it up, the card stock smooth and expensive between my fingers. Under the amber streetlight, I read the embossed text: Christopher's name, phone number, and profession: freelance graphic designer. The irony was almost poetic. In that moment, holding his business card under the flickering streetlight, an idea began to form. He'd wanted me to know who I was dealing with. Well, now I knew exactly who he was. The next morning, after my future mother-in-law had shared her incredulous account of the previous night's events over breakfast, her voice still carrying traces of disbelief, I fired up my laptop and did some research. Christopher had a professional website showcasing his graphic design portfolio, complete with client testimonials and a comprehensive resume available for download. He was actually quite talented, with an impressive portfolio spanning everything from corporate branding to creative campaigns. But talent, as I'd learned the night before, didn't automatically translate to character. I downloaded his resume and began what would become my most satisfying revenge campaign. I thought to myself, with his real name, phone number, address, and professional qualifications at my disposal, I started applying for jobs on Christopher's behalf. But not the kind of jobs he was probably hoping for. Every McDonald's in the Vancouver area received an application from Christopher. So did every Starbucks, every grocery store, every movie theater, and every retail chain I could find online. His impressive graphic design resume was submitted for dishwasher positions, cashier roles, and janitorial services. I methodically worked through job search websites, targeting any position that offered quick, easy applications. Over the course of several weeks, I must have submitted over 80 applications in Christopher's name. Each one used his real contact information and authentic resume. The beauty of it was the disconnect. Here was a highly qualified graphic designer apparently desperate for minimum wage work. I never got to witness Christopher's confusion firsthand, but I like to imagine his experience. Picture him answering his phone, expecting a potential client interested in his design services, only to hear, "Hi, this is calling from McDonald's about your application. When would be a good time to schedule your interview?" I could almost hear the bewilderment in his voice as he'd stammer, "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake." The mental image of his bewilderment became a source of personal satisfaction during my morning coffee. How many times did he have to explain that he hadn't applied to flip burgers or stock shelves? How many managers did he have to convince that his resume submission was some kind of mistake? The thought warmed me more than the caffeine. I kept this up for about a month, adding new applications whenever I had spare time. It became a small ritual, a few minutes here and there, ensuring Christopher's phone continued to ring with opportunities he'd never requested. Eventually, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check if his website was still active. Perhaps it was time for round two of my campaign. But when I visited his URL, I found nothing. The site had either been taken down or moved to a new address entirely. Maybe the constant calls from potential employers had prompted him to rebrand his business. Maybe he'd decided a lower online profile was preferable. Or maybe he'd simply grown tired of explaining to confused hiring managers that his graphic design resume had somehow found its way into their minimum wage job applications. Whatever the reason, Christopher had effectively disappeared from the internet, at least under his original business identity. Mission accomplished. Looking back, I suppose I could have let the whole incident go after the police arrived and resolved the immediate situation. But some actions demand consequences, and Christopher had chosen to escalate a simple parking dispute into something much uglier, all while my family watched. He'd wanted me to know who I was dealing with, and in the end, he'd given me all the tools I needed to return the favor. The business card he'd thrown at my feet in anger had become his undoing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting creative. That is the whole story. Honestly, this guy turned Christopher's own arrogance into the perfect revenge weapon. I'd give him a solid 2 out of 10 Slytherins, just enough mischief to teach a lesson without crossing into true villain territory. Christopher literally handed him the tools for his own downfall. What do you think? Was this creative justice, or did our narrator go too far? Drop your verdict in the comments below. That's all for today's story. Hope you enjoyed the ride. If you did, give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. It really means a lot. And hey, if you're still craving more drama, mystery, or chaos, check out the next story right here on the screen. See you in the next one.